All right, so good afternoon, everyone, or should I say good morning or good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. And welcome to our new TEDx Copenhagen Instagram live format, where we will be having a series around leadership in the future of work. And I see a lot of people joining. Please let us know where you are joining us from in the big world, if you're in Copenhagen, or I think someone will join us from the US based on the guest that we will have in a while. So give us a like or a heart and let's know you're with us. My name is Caroline Hartz-Sehested, and I'm normally the moderator for these TEDx Copenhagen Future of Work live events. But for the next couple of weeks, I have the pleasure of being here in our little TEDx studios. I have my little TEDx cup with me, trying to make it my home for the next couple of weeks, where we will be talking about leadership in the future of work, and where I have a lot of exciting guests joining me from different industries and different parts of the world. So please, as we go along, put in your comments, your questions to the guests we have, so we can get as many different perspectives on the theme future of work and leadership in the future of work. Even though I really like doing the live events, I think it's also a great opportunity that we still have our sponsors, COVI and PwC. We're not able to be at Copenhagen Business School right now, but hopefully we will be back sometime in the future. But today, I'm actually not here alone. I have the pleasure, you may recall that Nikolai was with me at the last sessions, but today I'm as lucky as last time, because I have one of the awesome crew members from the TEDx Copenhagen team with me. And today it's Sophie, who is here today. And I know she loves to come into the camera, but you have to come and say hi, so you can everyone see who's with. Here she is. And Sophie, she has definitely showed some engineering skills I have never seen before, I have to say, because she put up the wall, and I'm not saying too much, but it's so big, this wall, that we could actually have 100 people lined up and have taken their picture in front of it. So she's really, it's been like building a tent for her for 50 people, but she did so well. And she's here with me today to make sure that if anything happens with the technique, she will be my lifeline, right, Sophie? Yeah. And also she will take in all of your great questions and try to bundle them and give them to me as we go along, so we can get them answered. But today I'm really proud and been looking forward to our two guests joining us from different industries. And the first guest is Andrea Kates, who is the managing director and co-founder of the consultancy company Futureproofing Next, who will give her viewpoint on why leadership must enable innovation. And our second guest after Andrea will be Jakob Bøs, who is the Senior Vice President of Corporate Strategy and Stakeholder Relations at Aarstiderne, the most sustainable energy company in the world right now, who will talk with us about how you can get sustainability on the top of the corporate agenda. So there's a saying that early bird catches the worm, or the good worm. And today my first guest is definitely in some way an early bird in two matters. First of all, because she had to get up really early. She's calling in live from San Francisco, where I think it's around 6 a.m. in the morning. So she's an early bird for getting up early. But she's also, secondly, an early bird because she is actually a living proof of the metaphor early bird catches the worm, as she has successfully worked with innovation and early opportunities and proved how corporate teams can actually gain the advantages over others on business innovation that you can take to the bank. And with that, there's not much more to say. I will invite our first guest all the way from San Francisco to our little TEDx virtual studio. So thanks for joining us, everyone. And please lean back and enjoy the conversation and ask some questions as we go along. So let's see if I can get Andrea, join us. Let's see if she's awake. Something's happening now. Oh, there you are.
There
Good
we
morning,
are.
Andrea.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
Great to see you.
I'm even better when I see that you're up so early
Yeah, it's really
joining
great
us.
to be up early. Can you hear me okay?
You are going through loud and clear here in my headphones. And
Well, by the way, it feels great to be in Copenhagen because we've been sheltering in place in San Francisco. So it's wonderful to be out of my country and feeling like I've just transported. So yeah, it's great.
yeah, it's really funny, Andrea, because when we talked the other day, I realized that you had actually spent quite a lot of time here in Copenhagen, for one. And I also realized that you and I, we actually lived almost next to each other in San Francisco in the area south of Market, Soma, some years ago. And for some reason, our first meeting should be 9,000 kilometers from each other,
It,
sitting here
it,
in the live session.
it is incredible. And I wanted to thank TEDx Copenhagen for sending me this fantastic
All right,
mug
I love it.
for
I love it.
my water glass. Thank you very much to the TEDx Copenhagen team. That was very creative.
I want to thank the team as well because I actually have my black cup. I tried to catch
Skål.
the colors. It's red and black, but it says that. Skål, which is cheers in Danish, skål in water. Actually,
Skål.
you
Yeah.
really know what people have in their glasses in these Corona days, but I can see yours is water at least.
At least it looks like it. That's right.
Yeah. But Kate, you are joining us from your own Instagram profile today.
Yeah, I'm Andrea Kates, and I'm coming from San Francisco, and yeah, I'm coming in from Instagram Live, sitting in San Francisco right now.
Yeah, and this is your first. I mean, you've done a lot of different interviews and podcasts, and you've even written your own book. But I think this is your first Instagram Live session, right?
It's fantastic. Yeah, I work with a person named Sean Moffat, who's my kind of partner in creativity and creation, and he's in Toronto. I'm in San Francisco. We've been doing pretty much everything virtually, including consulting for companies and leading a community called Futureproofing Next, but we've never done it on Instagram Live. So I'm super excited to be doing this medium. I've actually learned how to do this from your team. I think it'll be something for the future.
Fantastic. So here we are, and everyone who's joining us from Kate's profile, please thank you for getting up very early. And my name is Caroline, and I'll be your host. Let's everyone give Andrea a warm welcome to this session. So Andrea, you are the global corporate transformation specialist. You are, you can say, have a background as a tech startup CEO, and now you're working as an advisor. You have worked on, you can say, more than 200 corporate initiatives to equip leaders to commercialize emerging trends and technologies and take those innovations to the bank. And today you are then the managing director and co-founder of the consultancy company Futureproofing Next, which have a vision to redefine what innovation means and how companies can make it a successful habit. So, and actually before we start, there's a little bit of a disclaimer, because when we talked the other day, you had so many ideas on how we could make ensure that people would actually stay here for the 30 minutes. So I have no idea what's going to happen in these 30 minutes, but I do know that I think we can expect the unexpected with you, Andrea. So,
well, I just thought I'd start with the symbol of American COVID, which is that this is the first idea that I think we should think about as we talk about leadership and innovation. And it's a roll of toilet paper. And with the permission of the people in the chat, I would really love to start with a question, which is the United States, when the COVID pandemic began, we ran out of toilet paper. And so all of the stores, people believe that they were hoarding toilet paper. Not sure that that's the case. But I thought that I'd plant this as an idea because the question for the group out, in Instagram land is, what would you do if you were a business leader realizing that toilet paper had just become completely impossible to get from the grocery store. And I'll come back to that in just a minute, because it's the way of thinking that I believe is at the core of what you and I will be talking about this morning. So I'll come back to that in a minute.
So with that little teaser, let's see what you guys come up with, maybe some good ideas on how you would tackle that situation or crisis that we 3 months ago would never imagine would happen. So, but today, Andrea, our world has gone through a global social experiment that we could not foresee. It's been, you called it the other day, a radical reset of all the routines, all the norms we have been used to for the many past decades. So as we head back to work after COVID, are we simply just rearranging the deck on the chairs of Titanic, which you said it the other day? Or what should leaders do radical or dramatically different today in the situations that we have here in 2020?
Well, I really love the expression, and it might be an American expression, that are we rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic? And I always feel like we should be on singing the song from the movie The Titanic, and really the drama of a group of people, you know, in a big emergency situation, stuck on a big boat, perhaps missing the iceberg in the future, right? So they didn't necessarily see that. But, you know, once you're in that situation, what do you do? You know, do you try to go back and say, we wish we had seen that iceberg? Probably not possible. Do you do something proactive to save as many lives as possible and maybe, you know, really be innovative in the way of the present state? Or do you, what I call, rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic, where what you're doing, and my analogy is with innovation, are we just innovating the obvious? Are we just innovating to kind of, quote, get back to work? Whereas what we should be doing is having a vision of what should work really look like now? What's changed? One of the big things that we'll talk about is what's changed. And that's where we get to this notion of what I call the pyramid of possibility. That at the bottom, you know, and we'll get to the toilet paper in a minute to see what people have said, but, you know, at the bottom of the pyramid, you absolutely have to make sure that your desks are a certain distance apart when you get back to work, right? And you move up the pyramid and it's like, well, wait a minute, why is it that we're even going back to work? You know, working remotely was pretty good. And I just noticed that a lot of this, I live near, you know, and work in Silicon Valley, a lot of the Silicon Valley companies are saying we just built the headquarters, but maybe that's not the way to think about work in the future. So then you go up the pyramid to the next level of really reimagining a future where you and I feel so close to each other right now, Caroline, right? It feels like we're in one sort of tribe. Why do we have to pay the crazy rents of San Francisco to work together? So that's the last thing. And then the highest point of the pyramid, I think, is to innovate with regards to, can we lead a different future? Can we really think much more broadly? Can we collaborate with each other? Can we develop these ecosystem relationships where we build a different kind of work and we don't necessarily rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic, which might mean, you know, getting back to business with some approaches that might not work anymore and might not serve us. So I think that that's the most important thing, is to think about the pyramid of possibility and move up that pyramid.
Yeah. And so what, I mean, with all your experience working with corporate teams, trying to push the innovation on the agenda, I mean, right now is the crisis, is the turning upside down of our world right now, who has led to us, you can say, upscaling digital situations where we would foresee that, you know, our working models would look in one way in 5 years, and now it's looking that way right now because of the crisis. But let's say that, I mean, knock on wood, we don't have a crisis for the next 5 years, which will force us to think differently. What is it that you do to encourage and help leaders, talents around the world to become more innovative and kind of changing the status quo to take money to the bank, as you say it?
Well, to me, the difference between what a lot of people call innovation theater, you know, where you have a hackathon and you have activity and you have brainstorming and you have a lot of startup energy, but it's not necessarily approaching the challenges that are the most important. And I'll go back to toilet paper in just a minute. So let's think about what every single industry has done. You know, it's been really inspiring to see all kinds of companies, whether it's Khan Academy that helped parents in the United States figure out how to teach their children when suddenly schools were shuttered overnight, or whether it's a company like Dyson that figured out how to develop ventilators. General Motors did a collaboration with a startup and figured out that they could partner with a ventilator company, a startup, and bring the scale of General Motors to the innovation of the ventilator company and produce things very quickly. People weren't buying cars, quite frankly, in the beginning anyway, so their ability to pivot. But I think this idea of just innovating anything versus innovation you can take to the bank, the difference is, what's the problem we're trying to solve? What's the vision that we're trying to approach? And I'll show you my very high-tech version of this pyramid of possibility. So, for instance, at the bottom of the pyramid is, you know, you go back to work. You go back to work. It's like, well, that was a moment, we call it pardon the interruption. You know, we kind of put a pin, we put a pin in business, and it's like, I'm sorry, we've just interrupted, right? So that's like figuring out who you should sit next to, measuring for how I can be 6 feet apart from Caroline and move my desk, right?
Yeah.
Redesigning work is probably things like, you know, wait a minute, maybe we can work remotely. Maybe we can have a very different supply chain. Maybe our work itself can be based on projects and remote access, and maybe the platform of how we collaborate can become more important. Reimagining the future is the question of, you know, what is the work we're trying to do? And I believe that especially the generation that's at Copenhagen Business School and coming out of university today can heed some words we'll talk about that I think were really well spoken by Barack Obama in the United States over the weekend, where, you know, what can graduates do? I'll give you a very specific example. So let's take toilet paper. At the bottom of the pyramid, okay, you figure out that either people are hoarding, or as it turned out, there was lots of toilet paper. And I'm terribly sorry to be discussing bathrooms first thing in the morning here. No. But anyway, it is what it is. So at the lowest level, right, you just make sure that you look at the supply chain, right? Like you just say, wait a minute, restaurants are closed and hotels are closed. So all of the toilet paper that had been channeled to those supply chain outlets, right? Hey, let's just figure out a way to turn the trucks around. Instead of having 50 toilet paper rolls, make it in 10 and redistribute it. So that's at the bottom. The next level up is something, and once again, I work in Japan, and it's very common for people to use a bidet in Japan. And for people, I don't know if that's something that's universal, but, you know, it's a toilet that kind of has a brain. It turns out when we talked to a colleague who works for Moen, there's back orders of bidets for the first time. Wow. So Americans were not very culturally used to this, but overnight they became open-minded around an alternative to this toilet paper crisis. Okay, so let's imagine we're a business leader like we're trying to encourage today. If you really want to take it to the bank, sure, you can invest in bidets. Great idea. You can invest in a supply chain that changes the path from toilet paper in grocery stores and make sure that the toilet paper going to restaurants is channeled there to the grocery store so consumers can get it. But moving up, I really would recommend that leaders on this Instagram Live think about even more. So if you move up the pyramid to really reimagining a future, is there a future where, you know, you're really looking more broadly at, you know, saving water? And it turns out that Moen, which is a company based in the United States, and I'll keep holding up names, has invested in a Kickstarter campaign and done partnerships with a startup that is doing that's doing a notion of water saving so that the faucets themselves save water. And then the last part of this is the sustainable ecosystem. So the idea of being able to lead the future is also important. Yeah. So leading the future would be, you know, who can we get together with? Anyone in a company can do this. Anyone in a company can say, you know, can we lead the future by being able to think differently? Who can we get together with?
And so
To build an ecosystem.
When you talk about this ecosystem and how we can build it into the future, you make it sound so easy because you've seen that it can be done. But what are the skills that these leaders, and there are a lot of students joining in to watch these series who might want to be leaders in the future? What are the skill set that is needed to have this innovative mindset and to drive these world impact changing companies or habits or sustainability, creating a better world? What is it that these people need to have?
Well, there are three things, in my opinion. And we used to have hero leaders, right? We used to have companies that were run by individuals. We had like Jack Welch at GE in the United States, and people who were really trying to inspire through an individual personality. And that individual's charisma was what would lead a movement. But now we're seeing that the reason that we say anyone, anywhere can do this is that there's different skills that have to happen. So one is that we have to be really brilliant at leading at reading change. Yeah. So not brilliant at knowing all the answers, but really brilliant at being able to read what's happening. When you're on the Titanic, you're not thinking, wow, I really need to get dinner now. That's not the right question. So how can you read the change quickly? So that's one, brilliant at reading change. Two is insanely skilled at shifting gears. Yeah. And sometimes the people with the most experience actually are the least able to switch gears because we're so invested in the legacy, right? Yeah. We're so invested in how we got here. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And then the third thing is inspiring. And to me, this is also the reason that I'm so inspired about anyone at any stage in their career. Once you're brilliant at reading the change, you're really good at shifting gears. Being able to be committed to a new future is being able to get others on board. And you don't have to have the loudest voice. You don't have to be a charismatic individual hero anymore. You just have to have a great curiosity about, can we go up this pyramid? Can we go up the pyramid of possibility higher?
And I think the curiosity part that you're mentioning, we had an interview earlier at TEDx Copenhagen with the CEO of Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies. And Dasha was telling us that, the best ability to survive in the future and keep on being innovative is to learn, to relearn, and to learn to unlearn. So with these three characteristics, you're talking about being brilliant in reading change, being insanely skilled in shifting gears, and inspiring commitment to a new tomorrow. Can you maybe, Andrea, give us an example of a company that you have worked with where the leaders and the team was, you can say, a living proof of having these characteristics and driving that change?
Yeah, well, I think the first is when I was in Denmark, I really loved the company Aarstiderne, which has a way of delivering food in a box. And they were some of the pioneers in that area. And the ability to know what a family needs and put it in a box and make a really easy subscription was a great idea. Well, I was lucky enough to work with a company in the United States called Stitch Fix. And I worked with them when they were going through their IPO and going through a lot of transformation. And there were some really inspiring leaders, including Katrina Lake, who's the CEO and the founder. But and
maybe you just want to say what that company does, Andrea.
So what Stitch Fix does is they take boxes of clothing and they have a combination of a live stylist who's assigned to you, as well as a very sophisticated artificial intelligence and machine learning engine. And what they do is they get to know you so well that they're able to give mass customization. They know what Andrea wants to wear. Yeah. They know the fact that maybe I'm about to go to a special event, or maybe I'm going to a job interview, and I need to look a certain way. And they have a huge database. They know what my, of course, body type and sizing and all of the piece is that the ability to go basically through a very intimate conversation, but also backed up by a lot of software, so that basically they have a relationship with people. You get a subscription to a box every week. And someone says that my screen is flipped, so let's see if I can figure that out. It's at the bottom right that I have to do.
Yeah. Otherwise, there's a small icon at the bottom, but otherwise, I think you are. Nope. Yeah, no, it's the other way.
Nope.
I think we just go along because you're
we'll
very
just
good
keep
at
going.
explaining it. I love when we did our little talk the other week, and every time you were saying a Danish word, you would hold up a picture to me. But I have to say that your pronunciation in Danish was just flawless. So I'm sure that people can follow your explanation as we go along. But Andrea, I wanted to also know, now you talked about the qualities and the characteristics that you believe a leader needs to have today. But what about a good leader in 20 years? What is it that the leaders today will need to change for the future to be able to lead in a future with so much uncertainty as we see it today?
Well, I feel like I should probably sit like this now to do it, so I'm not flipped. But anyway, people will think, God, what an amazing kind of modern art presentation of this. It's like a Picasso.
Do your yoga pose.
Yeah, I'll do yoga sideways, hopefully. But yeah, I don't want to touch all the buttons quite yet. So I would say that the world's about to become really different. Number one, there was a book years ago called The World is Flat. I think that the world is now not flat. I think the world is seamless. The world is completely seamless. When we get to the point where company headquarters don't have to be any particular place, and the borders between countries, I mean, it's harder to get across a border from country to country now because of COVID than it is because of work. And so what I think is super important is for us to be able to understand. And when I say the future, when I say future-proofing, the future is like coming in 9 months. But here's the world that might occur. And I would encourage all of us, because I don't like to predict a future, but I like to imagine it. So I think that there's a world where, first of all, seamless world. It's a seamless globe. So I think that that's the first part. I think the second thing is the ability to always be in a state of what I call perpetual refresh. If it's learning to unlearn and learning to learn, I mean, what is it that a company needs to do? You don't have to have great predictions. You have to have in your DNA the ability to be in this state of refresh. And Satya Nadella has a book called Hit Refresh. And the way that Microsoft was able to really change from its old legacy mindset to a new mindset was the ability to change the curiosity and the mindset of the leaders within the company to be open to change. And then I think the third is this feeling, catch up, don't give up. Yeah. And I think that every company, I remember giving cameras to my sons for Christmas a couple years ago. And I was super proud because they were like, oh, it would be really wonderful. We gave them actually these little digital cameras. And that was the year that the iPhone came out, and they basically, took this old technology, which we thought was really new, and we were super excited, like, here's your presents, guys, and you're going to really love these digital cameras. And I'll never forget the feeling of sort of, here's an iPhone right next to it. And so we had missed the digital revolution as we spoke, and they're like, thanks, So I think that the feeling of catching up with technology, whether it's machine learning or AI, and really getting learning to be part of, really getting that into your DNA as a company, super important.
Yeah. And hopefully as we go along, this is a great opportunity for all of you, whether you're students, young professionals, or senior leaders in the industry. If you have any questions to our great expert all the way from San Francisco, Andrea, who's been working with innovation for so many years, please, now is a golden opportunity for getting some answer to these. But we did actually have some questions coming in before the session through our Instagram post. So Andrea, here's someone who wants to know, we talk a lot about technology, we talk a lot about innovation, but what about the people? What about the social impact? What about the why? You want to explain a little bit about that?
Yeah. Um, yeah. I really am inspired by the fact that actually, of all people, Deepak Chopra said something really interesting last week, which is that what we're trying to fix is not what needs to be fixed right now. That in the pandemic, we can solve the toilet paper problems, right? That's the easy stuff. We can rearrange those deck chairs. But what we can't solve is what people are feeling right now. And the pandemic, Deepak Chopra was saying, the real pandemic issue is not the virus, it's fear, it's economic insecurity, it's the sense that the world's not going to be the same. It's the sense that graduates who are coming out of school right now are somehow going to be given a world that's not their fault, but is completely chaotic. And basically, I believe that a lot of companies are what I call tone deaf. They're not listening well to the signals of the people because, we're not economic units. We're people. We're not a society. We're people. And at the end of the day, we need to understand that, the basic needs, I was thinking about how many friends of mine have been buying flour and baking bread. And, it's just people who haven't baked bread in a really long time. So what is it like to get back to our souls and our human side and think about our responsibility for something bigger? When I think about, sustainability in the planet, can we take some time out the minute we get back to work and sit down with ourselves and reach out to other companies and say, what the hell?
Yeah. And
what's just happened?
Do you think that, knowing the psychology and the behavioral routines that we have, do you think that people will come back? I know that there's been some studies here in Denmark also when they have asked, younger generation, what's the best part of the corona period has been. And they would say, well, the best part has actually been that I've been together with my family, that we have had to spend more time together, that we could play games, that we could bake bread, that we could go to the forest. I mean, something that we would take for granted, but is coming to us through this crisis. But do you think that people will, take that learning with them and change their habits and routines, or will they just go back to the hamster wheel?
Well, I'm optimistic by nature. I'm what I call a rational optimist. So I look at a lot of data, but in my heart, the reason I love business innovation is that I really believe that all of us as humans are put into work to make tomorrow better than today. I truly believe that, and I feel like that's what drives me, and that's my passion in doing the work I do. And so I believe every company has a chance to just not allow this to be a moment where we quote, say, pardon the interruption, let's go back to everything in January, because you can't go back. I'm optimistic and think that it's going to be a moment where, and this is where I think Barack Obama said this well. He said yesterday, if the world's going to get better, it's going to be up to you, meaning the college graduates, right? And with everything suddenly feeling like it's up for grabs, this is your time to seize the initiative. Nobody can tell you anymore that you should be waiting your turn. This is how it's always been done. More than ever, this is your moment, and it's this generation's world to shape. And I feel that like the first thing has to be for us to get really human, for us to acknowledge that we have seen our kids, we've seen our bosses and our colleagues, dogs and cats. We've seen people, in their pajamas. We've seen all kinds of things. You can't unremember that. You can't unsee that. Yeah. And I can't imagine going back to a boardroom meeting without remembering that, oh, Caroline and, her puppy and these human moments. I think it's for the good. I do.
And I think that, there's no doubt that your passion and your optimism is coming through in everything you do. But let's ask everyone who's out there with us, if you're optimistic towards the future, if you want to grasp this opportunity to change habits, or you think you will go back to normal. But let's see, give us a heart or a high five if you want to change habits based on this COVID-19. And as we talk right now, Andrea, there's actually a question coming in. It's from a person called Nikolai, who wants to ask you, what are some of the biggest obstacles you met when you come to a company with solutions?
Yeah, well, I call that arrogance. People who come with solutions before they've listened, I think, are wrong-minded. And so the biggest problem that I have is when I think I've come up with a great answer, or where I think teams have answers, but they haven't asked the right questions. And so to me, the feeling of listening, paying attention to the unmet needs of customers. We did a project last year on cybersecurity in China, and we thought we knew the answers. You know, you come in from another culture and you think you know, but it takes weeks of field work to really discern the job to be done. The job to be done was not to sell cybersecurity software. The job to be done was to let people trust you. And once you realize that people needed to trust you, then you can start to come up with solutions. But if you're solving for selling cybersecurity software, you're going to fail miserably. So I would say it's really important to dig into the deeper side of what the customers, the people really truly need before you design jobs to be done and products to serve that.
And with that answer, Andrea, I'm guessing that you have seen a lot of great startups, a lot of great ideas and innovation who reaches the market, but then may not stay in business for such a long time because they don't have a sustainable business plan. So how do you keep innovating on a product which may not have the potential as you thought it would have when you kind of went into the design and the production phase?
Well, I'll talk about something first. I mean, I'm a big fan. I do a lot of work globally. So I'm a big fan of like Saxo Bank in Denmark, for instance, because they have, it seems as if they have a process in place where they look at all kinds of issues and they keep themselves on their toes. They were a startup years ago, but they seem to be growing sustainably because they have a cycle where people inside the kitchen are keeping the kitchen the way it is, and people outside the house are looking at what needs to happen to fix the house while you're still working in the kitchen, right? How do you do that?
Yeah.
And then I also look at startups that have failed, and a lot of times, you know, people say it was premature, that their idea was premature. I actually think that you can't, that there are three waves, right? You need to, in the beginning of a startup, you need to think about this cool idea. And I think about Melanie Perkins from Canva. I don't know her. I haven't worked with the company. It's in Australia. But supposedly she wanted to get funding, and her hunger for funding led her to learn how to do kite surfing because she knew that some of the key investors would be kite surfing. So that energy and creativity and innovation around get my company funded is stage one. Stage two is get this great idea to scale. And so that's where you have to stop being having just the entrepreneurial mindset and start having this richer mindset around, you know, where are the companies where I can overnight and quickly hit, as I call it, escape velocity. You know, I call it 1, 2, 3, a million. Because 1, 2, 3, 4 won't work. Somebody else is going to come in with 4, 5, 6, right?
Yeah.
So you literally have to get escape velocity. And then the third stage, where I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't become scale-ups, don't become, really don't become larger, is because they don't change their mindset of leadership. They're still trying to learn to kite surf when they should be looking at very sustainable platforms, very advanced technologies to advance their ideas. It's not just the technologies, it's certainly the talent as well. But I think if people don't understand that there are three distinct mindsets, three distinct leadership styles that are required at different stages of innovation, then they won't get to that next level of escape velocity.
Yeah. Great 3 steps. I think a lot of startup companies, but also companies that are in business can learn from that and remind themselves staying on their toes and reflecting on these 3 stages. There's a question saying, how can we help our leaders shift their thinking beyond the base of the pyramid you shared?
Well, there's a guy named Matteo Rizzi, and I know that everybody thinks I'm like making commercial dollars from this, but I am not. He's a really cool guy. We had him on the Future Proofing Next webcast last week on the future of work. Matteo Rizzi. He lives in Portugal, although he worked for Swift. I don't know if people know Swift, the payments company, for 13 plus years. And he wrote this really great book called Talents and Rebels. And he explains that there's this sort of friction between rebels, you know, that want to make things different, and the legacy mindset. And so what has to happen, in my opinion, is that we all need to embrace this idea that Matteo shares, which is figure out a way for the rebels to thrive within the corporation. Because without some rebels, you know, you really need to, you know, you're just going to have a either business as usual, but with too many rebels, you won't have any structure and any ability to scale. So I think the first question needs to be, how do we get the ideas coming from the innovative rebels who have an entrepreneurial spirit, you know, entrepreneurs inside a company, how do we take care of them so that the brilliance of ideas can be married with the talents of scaling? That's the critical place for there to be a connection.
So we need rebels, but not all rebels, but a nice mix. Little bit of diversity is always good.
Absolutely.
Andrea, we are coming towards an end, but I do have a last question to you, which I know is something that's also close to your heart, because I know that you love to talk with millennials and students and give them share your experience and act as a mentor, and thanks a lot for that, because I think it's because of you that we sustain a lot of future leaders to come. But the last question I have here for you today is, how would you advise young professionals to enter an exciting future?
I think that the last line of Obama's speech was really inspiring to me, and I would steal it, although I'll get sued. So I will. I'll give him credit. I really love the notion that more than ever, this is the moment of the younger generation. And it's this generation's world to shape. It's not as if we've all got it figured out, because clearly we call these gray swans, you know, these events that are unpredictable. They're really unpredictable. So I'll give a very short story. A friend of mine has 14-year-old twins. He's a client, actually. And, you know, they are home from school, and so they're doing this homeschool thing. Yeah. And they were given a challenge to come up with something for COVID, and they came up with this amazing idea. Well, they know, you know, Python, so they were able to code it. They could create apps. They did a video about it. They did a value proposition. They read the same books we do. And I'll tell you what, I've taught at Stanford, I've taught at Berkeley, I've taught at CBS, you know, at Copenhagen Business School, I've taught at Aalborg, etc. These 14-year-olds would have won, hands down, any of our hackathons. It was fantastic. Wow. And, you know, nobody needs to know that they're 14. Yeah. No. So their ability and their skills, and to me, gaming and all the things we've taught our kids not to do, those skills for AR and VR and artificial intelligence, machine learning, anyone of any age is on equal ground. So I say that more than ever, it's this generation's world to shape. Yeah. Thank you, Barack Obama.
And I also think that we're seeing more and more companies who are doing what we call in business language reverse mentorship, where we will actually see the early talents advising the seniors and the CEOs of the company on technology and on how they should, which direction they should lead the company, which I think is something that 5-10 years ago we would never see in the hierarchical business models and organizational diagrams that we are so used to. There's actually one question that I would like to ask, because I see that, let's see, it's Pernille Krause. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but she actually have a really good question, and I think she might be an entrepreneur herself. She's asking you, Andrea, what would your number one advice be to find a specific problem to solve as an entrepreneur?
It's really easy. It's really easy, actually. Start from your heart, add a curious mind, and do simple experiments. But if you start with your heart, it's really unusual to say this, but I have this passion now about the toilet paper going to the bidets, going to the faucets, going to a global sustainable approach to water.
Yeah.
I would start there as an entrepreneur, and then start to, the experiments are great because they keep you honest. I might think it's a great idea, but trust me, once you go and do these, lean startup is a technique you can use for that. Once you start doing those experiments, the evidence will teach you everything that you need to be changing paths, changing your idea. But I really believe you should start with your heart. This is how we're going to change the world, is when all of us care about the things we're doing in our work. That's the future.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that also relates very well to Steve Jobs when he talks about the most important thing is to love what you're doing. So with that final advice from you, Andrea, thank you so much for joining us. And it's become very clear, at least to me, why you think that leadership must enable innovation. And I think we can also all agree that you did bring in some unexpected, because I have to say that I have never done an interview with a person who brought a toilet paper roll into the room. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you everyone for listening in. Please give Andrea lots of hearts and likes, and wish her a good rest of the day in San Francisco. Thank you so much for
joining us. And by the way, I need a 12-year-old to help me unflip my camera after this. So I'm going to be looking to a younger generation to flip the picture. That'll be my first idea after this interview. So thank you, Caroline. It was so interesting. Such a great community that you've got here. Fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Skål to TEDx Copenhagen. Skål.
Skål. Thank you so much for joining us. And
thank you.
In 15 minutes from now, we actually have the next guest with us, which is also a company that you know, Andrea, which is Aarstiderne, where we have Jakob Bøs, who is the Senior Vice President, who will join us to talk about the future of work and how we can get sustainability on the top of the corporate agenda. So please be back in around 15 minutes from now. We'll start at 5 o'clock. And until then, take care and see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
So now we need the recording.